rescue deal will have to offer shares to the government. For private companies, he says he may accept debt. The requirements are similar to those for airlines seeking payroll assistance. And in terms of the sort of companies this might apply to, Roger, of course, the obvious one that springs to mind is Boeing. But, you know, the other interesting thing that we heard as well, and this was in a Bloomberg interview, Stephen Mnuchin saying he's considering the creation of a government lending program for U.S. oil companies. He said investment-grade drillers should look to the Fed, but that lending program might extend more to those in the high-yield category.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. The Gilead Sciences, their shares were whip-soaring for the second time in a week. Now, that came after a summary of a Chinese trial of its COVID-19 drug appeared to show it was a failure. But the company and a scientist working on the trial say it doesn't fairly represent the actual results. The World Health Organization says it accidentally posted the results online, but they were quickly removed.
Those are your top stories for the latest in global news. Here is Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. It is, in fact, Sandra Kilhoff picking up here on Boris Johnson planning to return to work on Monday, according to The Telegraph. The Prime Minister has told aides to schedule catch-up meetings with individual cabinet ministers next week to get fully up to speed. He will return at a critical time, with the UK more than a month into its virus lockdown. Ministers are said to be relying on him to inject fresh impetus into plans for an exit strategy. In Italy, the number of coronavirus recoveries have overtaken new cases for the first time. Bloomberg's Alessandro Speciale says it follows 7 weeks of lockdown.
It is a sign that the drastic curbs imposed on movement and business are finally checking the disease. Italy is planning to start easing the lockdown on May 4, starting with the manufacturing, auto and fashion and design sectors. In Rome, Alessandro Speciale, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
French President Emmanuel Macron has given a few hints on how virus restrictions will be lifted on May 11th. Bloomberg's Anja Nussbaum reports.
Restrictions won't be lifted region by region, but on a case-by-case basis, depending on sanitary conditions or transport, according to an official speaking Thursday. When schools, younger students, and those with learning difficulties will be prioritized. More details are expected in about a week. In Paris, Anja Nussbaum, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And the drought that is ravaging large parts of Europe is getting worse. In Poland, Bloomberg's Marek Zaleski says authorities are continuing to battle wildfires.
Some 8,000 hectares, or more than 10% of the acreage of Poland's biggest national park, has been on fire since Sunday, as the nation is suffering from the drought that may turn out to be the worst in more than a century. Dry spring after warm and dry winter has aggravated situation amid a multi-year rain deficit. In Warsaw, Marek Strzelecki, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Naira.
Sandra, thank you so much. Coming up, we're going to talk more about Europe. And meanwhile, European equities down 1.1%, 13 minutes into the stock market open. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all. Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation. But while the business has evolved, has your accountant stayed behind? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and meet your financial goals. Let Burden use their insight to create innovative tax solutions for your family and your business. Visit burdenllp.com to get started. BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
U.S. Energy Secretary Dan Brouillette says the U.S. government is taking aggressive and appropriate steps to help oil companies during the current glut. He told Bloomberg all options remain on the table, including the banning of Saudi imports.
Yes, it is an extraordinary situation that we're looking at in the marketplace today. You saw the numbers from yesterday. I don't think anyone, at least in my lifetime, has seen anything near that or like that. We're taking very aggressive but appropriate steps to help the industry and help this economy, if you will, get through this pandemic. One of the steps that we took initially was to open up the strategic reserve, make the storage available to the industry. That's what drove some of the pricing yesterday. You'll note that the folks who were closing out those futures contracts couldn't take possession of the oil because, candidly, they had no place to put it. So storage is a very acute concern all throughout the industry. We've now contracted to take approximately 23 million barrels of oil, put that into the strategic reserve. You also saw the president's tweet. I'm going to work closely with Secretary of Treasury Mnuchin to see what we might do to look at the laws and the facilities that Congress has directed us to create, the lending facilities, the Main Street lending program, other types of facilities. There's a Federal Reserve facility as well.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And 17 minutes into the European session, we're seeing a risk-off mood. Stock 600 down over 1%, FTSE 100 down 1.19%, CAC down 1.2%, DAX down 1.5%, the IBEX down 1.6%, and the FTSE MIB down 1.3%. US futures also looking in the red, though more marginally. S&P down 0.1%, Dow barely moved, Nasdaq down 0.3%. We're keeping an eye on oil, of course, as well. WTI June contract $16.76 the barrel. That's up 1.58%. Brent crude up 2.16% at $21.79 the barrel. And US 10-year Treasury bonds, its yield is down just over 1 basis point at 0.58%. The dollar looking a little bit stronger, up 0.3% on the dollar spot index, and the pound on cable 1.23, weaker 0.3%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Sandra Kilhoff with more on what's going on around the world. Sandra.
Good morning, Roger. The UN has warned that the coronavirus pandemic is turning into a human rights crisis. It said government responses in China, India, Hungary, Turkey and South Africa have been disproportionate. The report also highlights the use of phrases such as foreigner's disease, saying such remarks can lead to discrimination and attacks. Spain has reported the most new coronavirus cases and fatalities in almost a week. It comes just a day after the government secured parliamentary approval to extend its state of emergency. The number of new cases and deaths has also risen in Germany for the first time in a week. It comes as the country has begun lifting some restrictions on movement, with shops reopening and some students returning to school. And the pandemic has hit Hollywood. Film production has collapsed from more than 1,000 shoots in February to 0 last month. The LA Film Office can't say when the cameras may roll again, with delays expected in both movie launches and TV series. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Naira.
Sandra, my first question would be, where is Netflix and other streaming services? Where are they going to get any new content from if this goes on and people keep wanting to watch stuff on Amazon, on Apple TV, on Netflix?
I know, it's a really good question. We'll have to wonder. I mean, you would think that maybe other countries would be able to put forward some series, but we do know, for instance, here in the UK, that a lot of productions on TV series have been stopped or halted. Made in Chelsea, for instance, one of the examples of a reality show where they've only put out 4 episodes so far and have had to halt filming early.
All right, Sandra Kilhoff with the World News. Thank you so much. Now, EU leaders have inched closer to a compromise deal on a recovery plan during a video conference on Thursday. That's after German Chancellor Angela Merkel pledged to back a huge stimulus package for the bloc. When that news broke, we did see equities actually rise and 10-year BTP yields fall, and we saw a reaction in the euro as well. But member states are still split on how to spread the financial strains. And today, we see 10-year BTP yields jumping back up, weakness in European equities, but there's probably a number of reasons behind that, not just specifically what's going on in Europe. But let's cross over to Brussels on specifically what's going on in Europe with Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo joining us. Maria, so big divisions still playing out between EU leaders. Great to have you with us. What's the issue here? What's the biggest sticking point?
Well, Neera, there's a number of things that are happening here, and that kind of explains the reaction in the market today. We didn't really get any specifics. We didn't get anything on paper, and it's not clear just how big this fund would be. But what is clear is that European leaders do accept that this is going to mean big money. Angela Merkel, you mentioned it there, she said this is going to have to be huge. And even the head of the European Commission also pointed out that we're talking about trillions of euros, not billions. But the problem is, and this is really the debate, what shape should that help come in the form of loans, or should it be transfers? And here's the thing, for countries that are the most hawkish voices in Europe, they do believe that anything should be in the form of a loan that should be credit. And of course, that allows you to keep track in terms of what is this money being used for and how is it being spent. For countries like Italy and Spain, and their treasuries are going to have to issue a lot of debt very quickly now, they have a problem with that because they believe that if you only take loans, you don't take transfers, your debt to GDP will go incredibly higher.
Yeah, Maria, I mean, a lot of people from the outside will look and say that the EU is fumbling the ball on this one, not least when you get a warning like you got from Christine Lagarde that the European economy could shrink 15%. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, look, and she was in that call. She did tell European leaders if we don't take action quickly, we could see a huge decline in output. The head of the European Commission also said this is going to be the worst scenario since the Second World War. Now, the situation is the European Central Bank is having to do all the work the European leaders are not able to. They're taking much more aggressive action. They're doing it quicker. And that means perhaps that we could see an increase come quickly to that PPP program to buy debt.
Yeah, and on that point of the ECB, Maria, I mean, we were talking about this on TV, the fact that, you know, yesterday we heard that they're willing to take some junk debt as collateral temporarily. There's been economists out there saying that, look, the ECB could be the back door to a debt-sharing burden. And then we do a survey of economists with Bloomberg, 1 in 4 expecting a crisis bond plan boost next week. Tell us more about what we might actually see realistically from the ECB next week.
Well, Neera, you're right. There's the critics of the European Central Bank will tell you that ultimately it is doing fiscal transfers. It's doing things that European leaders don't want to do because it's politically toxic, but the central bank is actually doing it. And it's clear that the ECB is moving to protect Italy. It's shielding the country from potential volatility. And then next week, what we could see, if we don't actually see action from the ECB, is a very clear signal from Christine Lagarde that she is willing to increase in the amount of size, but also in time the length of the PPP program, which, as you know, completely changed the game because it really allows the central bank to be very flexible in terms of what it's allowed to buy.
All right, Maria, thanks very much. Maria Tadeo there, joining us live on the line from Brussels. Interesting moment today, Neera, because, of course, S&P are going to have their assessment of Italy's credit rating.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel like I saw a headline relating to this earlier. It might have been a note, so I don't want to say that it was a news headline, but in terms of Moody's hinting that it could hold off downgrading Italy. That actually was a headline that crossed the Bloomberg. Meanwhile, we're seeing the 10-year BTP yield higher by 6 basis points right now, up above 2%. And we are seeing the Stock 600 down 1.2%. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street puts its 2 consecutive weekly wins on the line today with prices lower for this week. Thursday was a wash with the major averages ending little changed. Intel is a stock to watch today. Its shares fell in late trading, even after first quarter results beat estimates. It warned of weakening sales in this quarter as it became the latest company to withdraw its financial guidance for the year. Despite a generally cloudy earnings outlook, Chief Strategist Brent Schutte at Northwestern Mutual remains positive on the market. He says stocks and earnings haven't been in sync for at least the last 2 years.
Back in 2018, earnings were up 23 or 24%, while the market fell 5%. And in 2019, earnings only budged like 1%, but the market zoomed 32%.
Quarterly results this morning from American Express may offer a clue into consumer spending. Apple's new old smartphone, the iPhone SE, begins arriving to customers today. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
No company wants to be involved in an international dispute. But when disagreements arise, you need expertise at your side. Take a closer look at ICDR, the International Center for Dispute Resolution. Backed by the longevity and strength of the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of cross-border dispute resolution services, handling more cases than any other institution. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
25 years ago. Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face-to-face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, Friday, we got there, and it's not been looking such a good week for European equities as the previous 2 weeks because we are heading for a weekly loss, and today we're certainly seeing red on the screen. The Stock 600 down almost 1.2%. FTSE 100 lower by 1.25 percentage points. The CAC 40 lower by 1.5%. The DAX down 1.8%. The IBEX leading losses down more than 2% right now. The FTSE MIB in the red as well. US futures also have a bit of a negative tone. S&P E-minis down almost 0.3%. Nasdaq futures lead the losses. Dow futures in the red. Also, yesterday we closed flat on the S&P 500. We ended up giving up the gains after the headlines about some trials in China of Gilead's coronavirus drug not working so well. The company has basically denied those reports, or at least not confirmed them in any way. The 10-year Treasury yield is down a basis point below a 60 handle. The 10-year bund yield slipped 3.5 basis points, negative 46. 10-year gilt yield also slightly lower. Now, 10-year BTP yields dropped by 9 basis points yesterday. We're up 7 right now. We're above 2%, and this might be reflecting the continued impasse after EU leaders had their virtual meeting yesterday. It raises questions over what we might see from the ECB next week, which might have to end up being the ultimate backstop if we can't get the fiscal stimulus needed through from Europe and that coordination. In terms of FX, dollar strength tells you that we're seeing a bit of risk off today, but what seems to be the outlier is oil. That, of course, was one of the big reasons we saw quite a bit of risk off this week, but we're steady today. WTI up 0.7%, 16.61. Brent at 21.57, up 1%, Roger.
But steady as a new low, that's the problem. Let's have a look at today's top stories. The EU Leaders' Summit ended yesterday with no agreement on a recovery package. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel promised to back a huge stimulus plan, but it wasn't enough to force through a deal. And all that comes as the ECB President, Christine Lagarde, has been warning that the bloc risks doing too little too late. The central bank thinks the euro area economy could shrink as much as 15% this year.
Yeah, and with the question of the ECB, Roger, already yesterday we were talking about the fact they're willing to take on junk debt as collateral temporarily. You've now got a quarter of economists surveyed by Bloomberg saying that we could see an extension to the bond buying program as early as next week. Consensus is more for September, but the fact that that question is out there does really start to show that the ECB, the market sees, might need to take up the slack that's lacking from the fiscal side.
Now, here in the UK, meanwhile, the Health Secretary Matt Hancock's vowing to dramatically ramp up testing and roll out a contact tracing programme. That comes after weeks of criticism that the government's falling behind. Hancock says test appointments will be available to all key workers and to their families.
We talked about Gilead. In top corporate news, Gilead Sciences shares were whipsawed for the second time in a week. That's after a summary of a Chinese trial of its COVID-19 drug appeared to show it was a failure. But the company and a scientist working on the trial say it doesn't fairly represent the actual results. The World Health Organization says it accidentally posted the results online, but they were quickly removed.
And Nestle posted first quarter sales that were better than expected. Lockdowns around the world were good for business. Consumers loaded up on Nestle's frozen foods, and that boosted brands that have faltered in recent years, such as Hot Pockets and Stouffer's. And right now, their share price is up 1.2%.
Those are your top stories for the latest in global news. Here's Sandra Kilhoff. And Sandra, you've got more on the virus in Europe.
Yes, good morning, Naira. The number of cases and fatalities in Spain have jumped the most in almost a week. Bloomberg's Laura Milan says the coronavirus has now peaked in the country.
The government says the worst is over and that the spread of the virus is slowing. It now needs to balance the attempts to contain the outbreak while also getting people back to work. The first measure to ease the lockdown will happen on Sunday, when children will be allowed to leave their houses and apartments for the first time in almost 6 weeks. In Madrid, Laura Milan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Meanwhile, Germany has reported its first rise in infections in a week. As Bloomberg's Birgit Jennen reports, Chancellor Angela Merkel has made an emotional appeal for Germans to stay on course.
We are not at the end of the pandemic, but at the beginning, she told lawmakers on Thursday. Only in 2 weeks' time, we will know whether lifting the restrictions was on time or came too early. And only discipline will help the country to return to normal, she said. In Berlin, Birgit Jennen, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
On the other hand, Italy and France have reported progress in slowing the spread of the coronavirus. Italian Deputy Health Minister Pierpaolo Sileri told Bloomberg about plans to ease the lockdown next month.
We will start with the industry like automotive, food, agriculture, fashion, and gradually then we will start all the other things. Obviously, to restart, you need to do this gradually with some other measures like distancing from people.
And the UN says the pandemic is turning into a human rights crisis. Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that some government responses to the virus have been disproportionate.
We see the disproportionate effects on certain communities, the rise of hate speech, the targeting of vulnerable groups, and the risk of heavy-handed security responses undermining the health response.
As a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Sandra, thanks for that. Well, let's reflect on the latest news out of the US in the last 24 hours. The House of Representatives passed and sent to Donald Trump the $484 billion aid package for small businesses, hospitals, and also for virus testing. That's the fourth coronavirus-related spending measure since early March. The total is about $3 trillion. That's 15% of GDP. All this comes as US cases rose at the slowest pace in 3 weeks. Well, joining us down the line now is our senior editor, Derek Wallbank. Derek, good morning. Thanks for being with us. Let's first of all pick up on that latest package that has been passed by the House and the Senate. There could be problems, however, with future aid. So give us a sense of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This one went through absolutely swimmingly. It's going to President Trump for approval. Just 5 opponents in the U.S. House. And so it seems like everything's on a glide path with U.S. aid, but that's not necessarily going to be the case future on. Democrats are really starting to look at what aid can be provided to cities and states who are going to see massive revenue drops and might have to trim their sales. What's going to happen with the U.S. Postal Service, which has got a cut in volume, and they want to give some aid there as well as some other places. But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the Kentucky Republican, said that he was concerned about the deficit effects that all of this stuff was having in aggregate, and so he is starting to pump the brakes on the idea that this stuff is going to pass with this glide path unanimous consent anymore. And that's, as I say, some Democratic priorities start to come as options in the next tranche, and some thoughts that what has been passed may not nearly be enough, and they might have to go back anyway to give further aid in some categories that have already been funded.
Right, and of course earlier this week, Mitch McConnell, who you mentioned there, Derek, said he'd certainly be in favour of allowing states to use the bankruptcy route. But in terms of who's getting money and why, there's been criticism, right, in terms of whether it's being accessed or given in the correct way. We heard Stephen Mnuchin requiring public companies deemed critical to national security that want aid to offer an equity stake to the government. Just walk us through the link between all these issues. Is that a response to the criticism, or is it something else?
Well, there is certainly a thought that the U.S. can't give blank checks. That, I think, is part of a response to the massive furor of the TARP bailouts in the last recession. So there is certainly some thought that the U.S. needs to get some skin in the game and that companies need to consider this aid differently than just like a tax optimization strategy. So he has gone and said that there should be some sort of stake in return for the aid to these critical national security companies. Now, when you think national security, you tend to think bombs and bullets, right? But that's actually a small portion. That is Lockheed, that is Raytheon, that is General Dynamics, if they wanted to take advantage, for example. But that's also Boeing. That's also Leidos. That's also some of these technology companies that keep critical infrastructure open. There's actually a much wider pool than people think of that might possibly be up for some aid like that. Now, you're right, there has been a ton of criticism about some of the companies that have gotten this because it appears that some of these small business programs were, somewhat broadly written by the U.S. Congress and very broadly accessed by even some publicly traded companies, while some real mom and pops couldn't get access to the money. That's where you saw the furor about Shake Shack, the U.S. burger chain. That's where you saw the furor about Ruth's Chris Steakhouse.
Yeah,
things like that. And you saw the Treasury Department come out with a stunning statement that said, you have till May 7 to give back that money, or else we might think that you didn't put the application in good faith to those publicly traded companies.
Derek Warbank, our senior editor, great to have you with us. Thank you so much. This is Bloomberg.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
We need to tackle coronavirus together. You can help by not travelling unless it is absolutely essential. With limited staff, TfL is only supporting those people making essential journeys. no one else should be travelling. If you must travel, try to avoid the busy times, particularly the early morning. We have already seen fewer people using our services. London, together we can all do our bit. Stay at home, do not travel, save lives.
We've never been further apart, yet somehow never closer. To support people making a difference and those local communities affected during these extraordinary times, Barclays is supporting the Big Night In appeal. We kickstarted our donation with £1 million and matched Barclays customer donations up to a total of another £1 million. So far, the appeal has raised an incredible amount. So thank you. Visit barclays.co.uk to find out more about how your donations are helping. All donations will be split between the registered charities.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all of your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find the Your New Episode section to see the latest additions. In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Use 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And European stocks have been dropping. That's following the region's leaders struggling to agree to a long-term plan for cushioning the economic blow from the coronavirus. Stocks 600 down 1.01%, FTSE 100 down 1.18%, CAC down 1.3%, DAX down 1.5%, the IBEX down 1.8%, and the FTSE MIB down 1.2%. Looking to the US opening later on, S&P down just 0.1%, the Nasdaq down 0.3%. The Dow actually barely moved right now. Keeping an eye also, of course, on oil after the extraordinary week that it's had. WTI $16.74 the barrel on the June contract. That's up 1.3%. Brent crude up 1.4%, $21.64 the barrel. US 10-year Treasury bond yields down just over a basis point, 0.59%. German 10-year Bunds down 3 basis points, negative 0.45 is where we find that. Keeping an eye on the dollar too, and at the moment the dollar stronger by 0.2% on the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index. The pound as well on cable, 1.23. That's weaker by just over 0.1%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Sandra Kilhoff with more on what's going on around the world. Sandra, good morning.
Good morning, Roger. Boris Johnson is planning to return to number 10 as early as Monday, according to The Telegraph. The Prime Minister has told aides to schedule catch-up meetings with individual cabinet ministers next week to get fully up to speed. Malaysia's exploration of energy blocks off its coast has turned into a five-nation face-off involving US and Chinese warships. In December, Malaysia's state-run energy giant Petroleum Nasional contracted a vessel to explore 2 areas in the South China Sea. Those waters are also claimed by Vietnam and China, which immediately sent ships to shadow the boat. And now the US has sent at least 2 warships to the area as well. And Washington has announced a $12.1 million aid package to Greenland. The move has been met with criticism from Danish politicians, with the Foreign Policy Committee saying the US has clearly crossed a line in trying to, quote, create division between Greenland and Denmark. It comes after President Trump last year expressed an interest in buying Greenland, an idea dismissed by Denmark as, quote, quote, absurd. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Naira.
Sandra, is Greenland something that's really being disputed that much in terms of why people want it, I suppose?
Well, it technically can't be disputed. It is sovereign territory under Denmark in that sense. But the reason why so many people are interested in getting access to Greenland is, of course, because there's speculation that it could become a way into a new trade route if the polar ice caps, for instance, melt more. But also, of course, the vast energy resources that are thought to be underneath the ice in Greenland as well. Plus, from a strategic standpoint, lots of military bases on Greenland as well. So hugely important for the likes of the US, Russia, China, Canada. Those are just a few of the countries that are interested in gaining access to Greenland.
I definitely don't have as much knowledge on that as you do. Sandra Kilhoff with the World News, thank you so much. Now let's get to the markets, back to the markets. Julian Chillingworth, Rathbone Investment Management CIO, joins us down the line. Julian, really great to have you with us. We're heading for a weekly losses in equities after 2 weeks of gains. What's been really interesting overnight, though, was some comments from Stephen Mnuchin, first of all in terms of aid to companies and asking for equity stakes in exchange. Now, this relating specifically for firms key to national security, but also the fact that there's been talk, and this was in an interview with Bloomberg, of thinking about a lending program for struggling oil companies. And of course, with the wild week that there's been in oil this week, big questions over whether we could see defaults in the sector. You'd imagine why comments like this came out in response and why the administration might be considering supporting the oil sector. When you hear various headlines like this and you put them together, does it give you some comfort in the broader US equity market?
Good morning to you, and great to be on the programme in slightly different circumstances. What I was going to say was, if you look at the US market, although this week it's been a lot more choppy, we've had a very strong bounce. We're roughly 20% off the lows, and I think that we've a long road to travel before we get to the other side in terms of this epidemic, and so consequently, I think that probably we're looking at fairly full prices in the US. In terms of comfort, I think it's good that the US government are talking about supporting the oil industry. They've talked about taking stakes in certain oil companies again as a key strategic move. I question whether or not there's a degree of electioneering in this as well, so one has to be slightly cynical on that. But overall, I think that the more support that the government can give, the better. It's just how it's done well on the other side.
Yeah, Julian, I mean, just picking up on that, it is interesting, as you say, the election is, we should not forget, only a few months away, at least theoretically. I don't think it's going to change. But you're at a point where the number of unemployed in the US is so dramatic, it must begin to come through into the point where concerns about the economy are so substantially greater that much, much more support is needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we were talking about market levels, weren't we? That the market has factored in that the Federal Reserve and the government in the States will backstop them effectively through this economic crisis. And it's just the duration of the crisis and how much damage is done to certain industries that the market's struggling to come to terms with. But I think it's fair to say that the longer the lockdown goes on around the world, the greater obviously damage to certain industries will be, and the oil industry, rather like in the great financial crisis, is in the second wave of this to a degree, and it's going to be one that where obviously you've got banks who have got large loans, particularly regional banks, out to the industry in the States, and it's what the knock-on effects from all of this has got to be. So yes, the Fed and the government need to step forward to support people through this, and particularly with rising unemployment hitting demand across the consumer space as well.
I just want to dig in, Julian, actually, on what exactly you think the market has factored in terms of backstops, right? Has it factored in the Fed stepping further and buying equities after it's moved into junk debt. Has it factored in enough support for the oil sector to stop a wave of defaults in the energy sector affecting the broader market?
I think, I suspect that in reality the equity market hasn't necessarily factored in specifics. What it's factored in philosophically is that, as I said, that the Federal Reserve and the government, the Treasury, will protect their backs effectively. So they will do, to coin Draghi, whatever is necessary. So I think that is what really investors are expecting. And then it's trying to sort through the wreckage and say who are going to be the real winners here, who are going to be the survivors, and who will governments, because they will let certain players go to the wall. And, let's not kid ourselves, not everybody's going to be bailed out here.
Julian, let me try and move the focus to Europe just briefly, because it is fascinating. We've had the European leaders apparently unable to reach a full agreement on what's going to happen, and dire warnings from the ECB about what the impact might be for the European economy. But a really interesting decision moment, though, because later on today, S&P are going to decide whether Italy's sovereign debt goes to junk status. We had suggestions Moody's might not do that. What's your guess in terms of that?
Well, I think, in terms of it going to...
Yeah, where do you think it's going to go? Do you think Italy will get to that stage?
Yes, I do. I generally do. I think the situation is pretty dire and it's going to get worse. And I think that the whole, dare I say this, the whole meeting yesterday, the played to the playbook, isn't it? Because we are not at that 1 minute to midnight moment. And until we get there, we're not going to get any resolution. The Germans are not keen to move to, again, backstop any full recovery fund, which is what's going to be required. And so consequently, I think we've got more drama to come in this particular playbook. And I suspect things are going to have to get worse in Southern Europe before we see any action from Northern Europeans.
But what people are then looking to, and again it comes back to the backstop idea, Julian, is the ECB. We've already seen that it said it will take junk debt as collateral temporarily. 1 in 4 economists expect a boost to bond buying next week from the ECB. Does the potential for the ECB as a backstop, is that enough for you to still be positive, for example, on BTPs despite the impasse with EU leaders?
Not particularly. I think if the EU could agree amongst their leadership and with Christine Lagarde that the ECB could issue Euro bond wide debt, then that's a compromise. So it's not a coronavirus bond that's mutualised and backed by the German economy, but it's near as close to it. Yeah. So that may be the final compromise, but I don't think we're going to get there in a hurry.
All right. Julian, thank you so much for joining us. Julian Chillingworth, Rathbone Investment Management CIO, joining us on the line this morning. And an hour in, Nera, how are the markets looking now?
Not too good on this Friday, Roger. We're down 1% on the Stock 600, and global equities are heading for a weekly loss as well after 2 weeks of gains. US futures coming off the lows, but still slightly in the red. This is Bloomberg.
Hello, I'm here to tell you that age really... The football boots that will help her score her first hat-trick. The tech that keeps you connected. The cozy jumpers that are perfect for snuggling up together. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern.
The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else. But I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepke. You're listening to Daybreak Europe. We're live on London DAB Digital Radio this morning. So the top news in the UK, the Prime Minister may be back at work Monday morning. That's according to a report from the Daily Telegraph. We've also had the Health Minister out this morning talking about how the PM is on great form. So perhaps that reinforcing the newspaper report that he may be at work on Monday, despite concerns about, whether he's coming back to work perhaps too quickly after being hospitalised for COVID-19. Also in Britain, retail sales this morning plunging 5.1% in March, as Britons, of course, have been staying at home. And then the big news line in Europe, European leaders sign off on this €540 billion plan to tackle the fallout of the pandemic. They give it some support, but they have failed to come up with a longer-term rebuilding plan. So after yet another summit, some measure of disappointment perhaps for some with that. In terms of the markets this morning, you see the slide in European equities now really firmly in place. We're down by 1% this morning. FTSE 100 also dropping even more, 1.2% lower. Bigger declines for the Xetra DAX, down by 1.6% at the moment. In terms of the bond markets this morning, BTPs are particularly in focus. So at the moment we trade at 2.06% for Italian government bonds, up by 8 basis points. So BTPs are dropping in terms and yields gaining this morning. US equity futures at the moment are also negative, down 0.2% for the S&P 500. As for the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index strengthens 0.3% as the euro weakens 0.4%, 1.0737, and the pound weaker 0.2% at 123.14 in terms of cable. There have also been of interest some earnings from Nestle, Sanofi, NA this morning. Frozen food, a big winner for Nestle. This is the largest company in the US stock 600 by value, so it's a really important one to watch. Posted its fastest sales growth in nearly 5 years. And Sanofi, the French drug maker, said that stockpiling made up about half of its revenue increase in Q1. So those are of note. Also breaking on the Bloomberg terminal this morning, the IFO April numbers, German business confidence, the index comes in at 74.3. The estimate was for 79.7. So this is a closely watched index, of course. We were expecting there to be a significant slide, and indeed it's even worse than it was in the prior month. So April German business confidence is at 74.3. In a moment we're going to be speaking to the economist and the IFO president Clemens Fuest, who is going to be joining us here on Bloomberg Radio. So hope to get to more details on how he sees Germany right now. Okay, those are the markets for you, all the breaking news. Let's also have a conversation a bit about the US this morning. The House of Representatives overwhelmingly passed a near $500 billion coronavirus aid package yesterday. The White House now says that President Donald Trump will sign the legislation today at noon Washington time. And I'm pleased to say that my guest today is Bill Smead, who is the CEO of Smead Capital Management and joins me now down the line. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So look, I want to start with the US. It's quite baffling for me, sitting here in London, covering Europe mainly, the US reopening without really having gone through a lockdown at all. Why is the perspective in the US so different to Europe when it comes to the virus, first of all?
Well, the United States is a huge land, right? It's 3,000 miles across from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and where we're having the most difficulty is in the most concentrated population areas of the country, and therefore our experience just comes from the fact that we're I believe a much more spread out set of population than you'd have say in England or Italy or a country like that.
Okay. So then, Bill, how do you see the markets right now? You've been sticking, or you say that you're sticking to many of your bets, even though it's been a pretty hard start to the year.
Oh, yeah. We had our webcast. We call it the willingness to look foolish. I'm a 40-year veteran of the investment business as of June the 2nd. Mm-hmm. And in my 40 years, it has been demonstrated to me that at peaks of pessimism, you must be able to, in your mind, visualize a great deal of success over 5 to 10 years that looks very different from what you're in at the moment, mm-hmm. right? When everyone hates a certain industry or a certain set of stocks for a reason, you have to ask yourself, well, what would it look like in 10 years if these were a lot more popular? Or if something is extremely popular, you need to visualize what it would look like for that popularity to go away. Because the biggest mistakes that are made in investing are putting too much confidence in overly popular securities and underestimating the attractiveness of extremely depressed securities. So what we've got here is a 10-year stretch where growth investments in a deflationary environment were the most successful, and value investments in things like energy and financials have dramatically underperformed growth investments. And then you exacerbate all of that with a bear market that was the fastest 36% decline I think in U.S. history, and you exacerbate those two trends, right? You take the stuff that was already cheap and make them dramatically cheaper, and then you take things that are expensive like Netflix and Amazon and make them substantially more expensive and exacerbate at the end of that move, and it makes it hard for people to say, gee, what could possibly go wrong with Amazon, who seems to own the world at this point in time? And then what could possibly go right for Chevron, who is the largest and financially strongest oil producer in the United States of America? And you can see the contradiction there. Who could be optimistic about the energy business?
Right now very difficult. But then you're also basically betting on a swift economic rebound, and that strikes many as increasingly strange. And I think that's why you've had the moves this week, a couple of weeks of gains in global markets, and now kind of as a lot of the data has hit, a lot more negativity. I mean, I don't need to remind you of the unemployment figures that we had out this week in the US, 26.5 million people, the 5-week total for unemployment jobless claims. So are you betting on a swift rebound?
Well, let's just compare this. Let's just compare this to the 07 to 09 situation. Our financial system was completely poisoned by a virus that came from lending money to people in 04, 05, 03, 06 to borrow money to buy houses, and then sliced up into mortgage pools, and then a massive amount of leverage upon leverage being put on those mortgage pools. So we had a virus. The virus was a complete poisoning of our financial system.
But it didn't stop people going out to work.
People were afraid. We got to almost 11% unemployment back then, but again, they thought we were going to go into a Great Depression, and if the TARP program had not been successful buying shares of the banks, we might have gone into a Great Depression. So in this particular case, we have volunteered. We have followed our leadership and volunteered to shut the economy down for a as yet known period of time. And so the question, the optimism is not so much how fast everything will return to normal, but will it ever return to normal? And all we're doing is we're saying that as 5 to 10 year investors, it's easy to see over 5 to 10 years that we will have returned to normal in 6 months or a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And the net present value of the future income stream, people are overestimating how much of the value of a company, like an energy company or a bank, is the money they were going to make this year.
Yeah.
What component of the net present value is this year? And in that calculation, for most companies, it might be 5% of the value. What you make in profits in the next 12 months is a small part of the net present value calculation, and investors are treating it as if it is a 40% part of the net present value calculation.
Well, and so, very interesting. So hang on in there, I suspect, is your message. Is that it? And I'm sure you will.
Well, again, to make the most money over 5 to 10 years, you have to accept some punishment in the sectors that are the most out of favor. You have to accept punishment if you want to make a lot of money the next 5 to 10 years.
Bill, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Been a pleasure having you on the programme. Bill Smead, CEO of Smead Capital Management there with his take on the market. Want to bring you some global news headlines now. Bloomberg's Sandra Kilhoff standing by. And you start off with an update on the UK Prime Minister for us. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Caroline. Boris Johnson is planning to return to work on Monday, according to The Telegraph. The Prime Minister has told aides to schedule catch-up meetings with individual cabinet ministers next week to get fully up to speed. He will return at a critical time, with the UK more than a month into its virus lockdown. Ministers are said to be relying on him to inject fresh impetus into plans for an exit strategy. Now, the number of coronavirus cases and fatalities in Spain have jumped the most in almost a week. Bloomberg's Laura Milan says the virus has now peaked in the country.
The government says the worst is over and that the spread of the virus is slowing. It now needs to balance the attempts to contain the outbreak while also getting people back to work. The first measure to ease the lockdown will happen on Sunday, when children will be allowed to leave their houses and apartments for the first time in almost 6 weeks. In Madrid, Laura Milan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
In Italy, the number of coronavirus recoveries have overtaken new cases for the first time. Bloomberg's Alessandro Speciale says it follows 7 weeks of lockdown.
It is a sign that the drastic curbs imposed on movement and business are finally checking the disease. Italy is planning to start easing the lockdown on May 4, starting with the manufacturing, auto and fashion and design sectors. In Rome, Alessandro Speciale, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And French President Emmanuel Macron has given a few hints on how virus restrictions will be lifted on May 11th. Bloomberg's Anya Nussbaum reports.
Restrictions won't be lifted region by region, but on a case-by-case basis, depending on sanitary conditions or transport, according to an official speaking Thursday. When reopening schools, younger students and those with learning difficulties will be prioritized. More details are expected in about a week. In Paris, Anya Nussbaum, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for that world news update. In a moment, we are going to be speaking to the IFO president, Clemens Forex. After the IFO survey, the current assessment comes in at 79.5. The business climate survey, though, slumping to 74.3. This is Bloomberg.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Chief Revenue Officer of the New York Mets, this means overseeing complex operations, key financial drivers, and interpreting data to make critical decisions every day.
How is your business managing complexity? Cohn Resnick can help you improve performance through an integrated business planning strategy that optimizes your data, streamlines processes, and keeps you ahead of the competition. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict, an epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
We're joined exclusively now from Wellington by the New Zealand Finance Minister, Grant Robertson. We've been talking about how alone and how unprecedented the approach that New Zealand has chosen to take in attempting to completely eliminate the virus, not just suppress or mitigate. In an economic sense, I'm wondering if you've looked at modelling or forecasting that suggests that this may enable a quicker and more robust rebound, or is there just the risk that even if New Zealand eliminates the virus, the rest of the world, for all intents and purposes, is still shut down, so the economic woes will continue?
The approach we've taken from the beginning is that the best economic response to the virus is a strong public health response. The sooner that we can get it under control, the sooner the economy can come back to some sense of normality. And so we've had our Treasury here do a range of scenario planning around different lengths of time that the virus would be slowing economic activity. So we have an alert level system in New Zealand, and the most strict end of that alert level, levels 4 and level 3, and then looking also at time spent at different levels.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Hodern with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. In Europe, all the major indices are down in the red, ending the week really risk off this morning. FTSE 100 down 1.5%. CAC and DAX are both respectively down 1.8%. European leaders have signed off on a plan to confront the immediate fallout of the pandemic on the economy, but failed on a longer-term plan. That's why we're seeing some hesitation in this market this morning. Here in the United States, futures are pointing to a lower start on Wall Street. One reason for that, sentiment yesterday hit a bit by this Gilead drug, remdesivir. Many were hopeful this antiviral drug was going to help with coronavirus patients, but the World Health Organization put out a report by accident. The FT reported on it, and they said the clinical trial flopped. We should mention, though, Gilead is disputing it. In the bond market right now, I'm looking at Italian 10-year yield spiking up 9 basis points today. Of course, that's to do with the fallout of that longer-term plan, yield 2.07%. Then we have to end in the oil market, stabilizing after a chaotic week. The first time on history, we saw WTI prices go negative on Monday. Today, this Friday morning, we are down 2%. We are stabilized at $16.14 on a barrel of crude. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Sandra Kiloff with more. What's going on around the world? Good morning, Sandra.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. The UN has warned that the coronavirus pandemic is turning into a human rights crisis. It said some government responses have been disproportionate and highlighted the use of phrases such as foreigner's disease as discriminatory. Spain has reported the most new coronavirus cases and fatalities in almost a week. It comes just a day after the government secured parliamentary approval to extend its state of emergency. The number of new cases and deaths has also risen in Germany for the first time in a week. It comes as the country begins lifting some restrictions on movement, with shops reopening and some students returning to school. And the pandemic threatens to cut off the world's 1.8 billion Muslims from their Ramadan traditions as the holy month kicks off today. Health officials are particularly concerned about communal prayers. The virus has already disrupted Christianity's Holy Week, Passover and the Muslim Hajj pilgrimage. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Great, thank you so much, Sandra Kilhoff there with all the world news. Now, I want to talk about Europe this morning. European leaders are in favour of this 540 billion euro plan to tackle the immediate fallout from the coronavirus, but they failed on a longer-term plan for rebuilding the EU at the summit yesterday. And then this morning in Germany, we've just had out the latest IFO survey figures that show the business mood in the engine, really, of Europe plummeting even further in April. So the surveys included business climate, current assessment and expectations, where the figure was expected to come in at 75, actually scored 69.4. And I'm pleased to say joining me now is Clemens West, the German economist and president of the IFO Institute for Economic Research. Thank you so much for joining us on Bloomberg Radio. Clemens, first of all, could you just put the numbers into perspective for us? How bad is the mood in Germany?
Well, it's very difficult to put this into perspective because it's never been so bad before. So it's a record decline. We are at historic lows. It is a decline across the board. And I suppose a big decline was expected. But what's worrying is that there is no sign of any expectation that things might improve in the next 6 months. So companies report a very bad current situation, and they report very negative expectations. To some extent, this certainly reflects uncertainty, maybe more than certainty that things will be bad in 6 months from now. But it's a historic and outstanding decline. We haven't seen this before.
Okay, so really a grim assessment. And yet, of course, Germany has won praise for managing to keep the coronavirus more in check than in other parts of Europe, under 2,500 deaths. What about what the government is doing? Merkel's ruling coalition agreeing this new 10.8 billion euro package for Germany, including wage support. So that doesn't seem to have brightened the mood for businesses then.
I think this does help employees to pay their bills. This does help some companies, but companies generally are starting to understand that how deep this crisis really is, and that this crisis will completely mess up their markets. We shouldn't forget that Germany is an extremely export-oriented economy, so if our most important trading partners collapse, like Italy, France, Spain, this is very bad news for the German economy as well. People are also starting to understand that part of the lockdown will be with us maybe still in 2021 or longer, because there is no vaccine in sight, there is no effective treatment in sight, and all that explains the decline in the mood.
Okay, so then in your mind, as an economist, what's the solution to the debate in Europe now about helping Italy, France, Spain? Obviously, corona bonds and that tangle kind of goes on, but they're the worst affected countries. What's the solution in your view?
I think it is very important to come up with, indeed, a medium-term solution. We need a fund for the reconstruction for the recovery that will hopefully come in 2021. The interesting issue is that it is maybe likely, but not far from certain, that France, Spain, and Italy will be worst hit. As I said, if we think back to the financial crisis, the strongest decline in growth at that time occurred in the export-oriented economy. So it may even be that this is a symmetric shock, or in the end, countries like the Netherlands or Germany may be the biggest losers. So at the moment, if we are setting up some insurance fund, it is not clear that this will help the South. It will help the countries worst affected. So I think that is a good move. But there is no, it's not like there is going to be money falling from the sky from Europe to address this crisis. It is a symmetric shock. All countries in the end will be strongly affected, and that means each individual country can only expect limited help from the outside.
Okay, interesting points. Thank you so much for joining me here on Bloomberg Radio. Clemens Fuest, German economist and president of the IFO Institute for Economic Research, on Bloomberg Television and Radio today. So thank you so much for speaking to us. I think a very interesting point that Clemens makes there, that it's not just about the health crisis. The economic crisis could actually hit export-orientated countries like Germany, perhaps even harder. So very hard to put the pieces together in Europe as to who is going to be hardest hit by this health crisis. Coming up next, though, we're going to talk about Gilead and vaccines. This is Bloomberg.
With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson are ready for a made-for-TV rematch at a time when fans are craving live action, and this time they'll have company. Turner Sports says quarterback greats Tom Brady and Peyton Manning will join them for a 2-on-2 match sometime in May. No word yet on where the match will be played. However, tournament organizers say they would work with government and health officials to meet safety and health standards. Turner said all donations and fundraising from the match Champions for Charity would benefit relief efforts for the COVID-19 pandemic. The chief executive of the Tokyo Olympics promised transparency with the Japanese public regarding the cost of postponing the games until next year. Organizers haven't said what it will cost to delay the Tokyo Games for a year, but early estimates in Japan range between $2 billion and $6 billion. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Portfolio Analyst, powered by Interactive Brokers, helps sophisticated investors understand the health of their complete financial portfolio. Portfolio Analyst is free and easy-to-use personal finance software that creates a consolidated view of banking, brokerage, and credit card accounts. Compare your consolidated portfolio against more than 200 benchmarks or create customized benchmarks for analyzing performance. Calculate time and money-weighted rates of return and use Portfolio Analyst for forecasting. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new...
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Did you know with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations in smooth streaming quality and discover local news, talk, and music stations you didn't even know existed. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening. Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Live to London on DAB Digital Radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And it's 9:30 a.m. here in London, 10:30 in Berlin and across Europe this morning. Welcome to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. So the big news line for the UK, the Prime Minister may be back at work on Monday, according to a report in the Daily Telegraph. Then Matt Hancock, the Health Minister, saying that Johnson is, quote, definitely on the mend, speaking to radio outlets here in the UK. Also, though, very interesting are the numbers that we had out of IFO this morning about Germany, just how bad business sentiment is in the powerhouse that is usually Germany. Clemens West, IFO president, really struggling to describe to me just how bad the mood is there because it simply never happened before. So that was a great interview earlier on. And that negativity really is also what we see in the stock market at the moment in Europe. So the Xetra DAX down by 1.8%, the CAC Quarante similarly down, slightly better in the UK, but the FTSE 100 still slipping 1.5%, and the Stock 600 down by 1.3%. We've had out some earnings from big companies, Nestle, Eni and Sanofi. Nestle was a winner because of the sales of things like frozen food. I mean, we're all on lockdown and, probably eating a little more than we should. And as for the drug maker Sanofi, stockpiling, pandemic related, that made up a big portion, about half of its revenue increase in the first quarter. In terms of the rest of the markets, looking to the US Open, we're down 0.3% on the S&P 500 E-mini futures after Asian equities also slipped this morning. Treasuries trade at 59 basis points. Of interest too, though, Italian BTPs, government yields there gain 9 basis points. So Italian government bonds falling. And the oil markets at the end of what has been this incredibly tumultuous week, where we start to drop 3.6% on WTI crude futures this morning, trading at $15.90. Brent crude at $20.92. So also down around 2%. Okay, so that is a look at the markets for you and data check. Let's talk a little bit about another angle to the coronavirus story. One of the most closely watched attempts to treat COVID-19 patients appears sadly to have failed. A leaked summary of a Chinese trial suggests that the drug developed by Gilead wasn't associated with patients getting better more quickly. The company, though, and scientists working on the trial said that this did not fairly represent the actual results. So there was something of a tangle. Meanwhile, the UK regulator has approved Oxford University's request to test another experimental vaccine in about 7 working days. So let's talk a bit about vaccines and drugs with John Lowerman, editor at Bloomberg's Health Team. Really good to speak to you, John. First of all, on Gilead, it was a leaked report that appeared on the World Health Organization website by accident, but it prompted a big move in the stock.
Yeah, this was a closely watched trial. All the trials with remdesivir, which is the name of the drug, it's an antiviral that Gilead originally developed to treat Ebola, which is now being tried in COVID. But all of these trials are very closely watched. This trial actually was stopped because of a lack of enrollment, and it was in severely ill patients. And one of the issues that analysts have brought up is that many antivirals actually work best early in the course of the disease. These were severely ill patients. Some analysts are saying, well, it's difficult to accept at face value the results of this trial, while others are saying it just doesn't look good overall, that the drug failed to bring down the level of virus in the patients, regardless of how the patients fared themselves.
Okay, so then will the research continue into that particular drug from Gilead?
Yeah, that research is going to continue. I think, there's any number of trials out there. As you probably know, the World Health Organization has a separate trial of its own that's out there. And so that will continue at least until we find out whether or not the drug definitively works.
Yeah. What about in particular what's going on in the UK? The government here is really sort of trying to make some progress against the virus, given the number of deaths in Britain. And the regulator looking at this one particular experimental vaccine in Britain, the government has thrown money also at trying to get a vaccine. What's your assessment of that?
So this is the Oxford vaccine that's under development by Sarah Gilbert, and it does look very interesting. She's been very bullish on the prospects of the vaccine, saying that doses could be ready for use by autumn, which some people have interpreted as meaning, by September. So that would be very fast indeed. We've written some stories about how vaccine development normally takes, years, and this would be, one of the fastest vaccine development efforts ever, probably the fastest, I would have to say. And it's a very interesting project that she has going on. We're going to have to see how well this works. This approach has never really been used in people before, and there are a lot of question marks around it.
Yeah, okay. So then give us a picture. We know that there are a lot of vaccines, currently under trial. Some 70 or 80, I think the figure was earlier in the week.
That's right.
Are there any that show more promise or any? What is the latest line in your view in terms of, tracking the virus as we watch so many infections, 2.7 million cases of this virus around the world now?
Right, yeah. Well, we don't have any data to say right now whether any of these vaccine approaches has had any success or not. I think there are 4 or 5 vaccines that are actually in humans. They're all in phase 1 studies. Mm-hmm. These studies are mainly to study safety, and the results of how well they work, we won't be able to see that for a while.
Okay.
So, the British government has devoted, but these are the results of a international collaboration, to bring pandemic vaccines like this to the market.
Okay, interesting. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Always great to have your thoughts. John Lauerman, editor on Bloomberg's health team, talking us through the latest when it comes to vaccines for the coronavirus. Now let's get all the latest in global news headlines. It's Bloomberg's Sandra Kilhoff, and you have more details about the virus in Europe. Good morning, Sandra.
Good morning, Caroline. The EU Leaders Summit ended yesterday with no agreement on a recovery package, but Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo says there is some hope with regional leaders endorsing a short-term €540 billion plan.
And while there's still tensions playing out between member states, there was, however, some progress made. Angela Merkel did concede that the economic response will have to be huge, and that is as the head of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, warned of a 15% contraction this year. The question, however, still remains, should that help come in the form of loans, or should it be grants? In Brussels, Maria Tadeo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Turning to the UK, where Health Secretary Matt Hancock is vowing to dramatically ramp up testing and roll out a contact tracing programme.
Employers of essential workers will be able to go on gov.uk to get a test for any of their staff who need a test.
The announcement comes after weeks of criticism that the UK government is falling behind. Meanwhile, Germany has reported its first rise in infections in a week. As Bloomberg's Birgit Jennen reports, Chancellor Angela Merkel has made an emotional appeal for Germans to stay on course.
We are not at the end of the pandemic, but at the beginning, she told lawmakers on Thursday. Only in 2 weeks' time, we will know whether lifting the restrictions was on time or came too early. And only discipline will help the country to return to normal, she said. In Berlin, Birgit Jennen, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
And Italy and France have reported progress in slowing the spread of the coronavirus. Italian Deputy Health Minister Pier Paolo Sileri told Bloomberg about plans to ease the lockdown next month.
We will start with the industry like automotive, food, agriculture, fashion, and gradually then we will start all the other things. Obviously, to restart, you need to do this gradually with some other measures like distancing from people.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Sandra, with that world news update. Now, coming up next on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Jeremy Stretch is going to join me, head of FX strategy at CIBC. We'll get his take on how the FX markets are reacting to an EU divided as how to deal with the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Yes, they may be inching towards some kind of deal for the short term in terms of supporting the European economy, but nothing on the longer term strategy. And as we were hearing earlier from Germany, from the IFO survey, the expectation is pretty dire in terms of business outlook in Europe. In terms of the markets, we are lower this morning. We trade down 1.3% on the Euro Stoxx 600 at the moment. Xetra DAX also down by 1.9%. US futures are weaker. The biggest mover in terms of bond markets, Italian BTPs this morning. This is Bloomberg.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with The Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, a place for mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at Bevel.
Oh, just there, Dave. Smashing. Great. Really? Night, Steve.
Yeah, see ya.
Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung Rugged range.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to National Lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you. Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all of your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find the Your New Episode section to see the latest additions.
Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, explore a sports documentary on TuneIn, like Sports Wars, telling the origin stories of classic rivalries, Raise Sports, about the concussion crisis that threatens football's future, and Dunkumentaries, a podcast devoted to the beauty and power of the slam dunk. For these and more, search sports documentaries on TuneIn. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
I'm Mel Kiper Jr., and if you can't watch me break down all the NFL draft picks, then listen to me with ESPN Radio on TuneIn. Just search NFL Draft to enjoy listening to comprehensive NFL draft coverage.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City. I'm Anna Marie Hodern with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. It's a risk-off Friday this morning. All the major indices across Europe are in the red. FTSE 100 down 1 4/10%. The DAX this morning now down 1 7/10%. We just had that IFO number. What this is German business confidence, and it's extending its slump, and it's worse than economists were expecting for the month of April. In the United States, we have futures pointing to a lower start as well. I also want to bring you what's going on in the bond market. The Italian 10-year spiking higher this morning, up 8.2 basis points. A lot of this comes as we had that short-term package from European leaders to deal with the fallout of the pandemic, but nothing longer term. The 10-year yield on the U.S. is floating just under 0.6%. And in the oil market this morning, we are down 3.5% on WTI, $15.94, about $21 on a barrel of Brent. Nothing like we saw the chaos on Monday, though. Things are starting to stabilize a bit in the oil market. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Sandra Kiloff for more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Sandra.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Boris Johnson is planning to return to number 10 as early as Monday, according to The Telegraph. The Prime Minister has told aides to schedule catch-up meetings with individual cabinet ministers next week to get fully up to speed. Malaysia's exploration of energy blocks off its coast has turned into a five-nation face-off involving US and Chinese warships. In December, Malaysia's state-run energy giant Petroleum Nasional contracted a vessel to explore two areas in the South China Sea. Those waters are also claimed by Vietnam and China, which immediately sent ships to shadow the boat. And now Washington has sent at least two warships to the area as well. And the US has announced a $12.1 million aid package to Greenland. The move has been met with criticism from Danish politicians, with the Foreign Policy Committee saying the US has clearly crossed a line in trying to, quote, create division between Greenland and Denmark. It comes after President Trump last year expressed an interest in buying Greenland, an idea dismissed by Denmark as, quote, absurd. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for that world news update. Now, coming up next, our colleagues in the United States are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak. So let's check in with Nathan Hager. Hi, Nathan.
Hello.
What's ahead for you?
Well, we're looking, Caroline, at the latest efforts to prop up the U.S. economy during the coronavirus pandemic. The House last night overwhelmingly, almost unanimously, passed the latest round of stimulus, but the debate is now quickly shifting to the next round and what that's going to look like. Democrats want to include more aid for state and local governments, something Republican lawmakers seem to be resistant to, but the White House sounds a bit open to it. That says the Trump administration, at least in the short term, looks at ways to offer aid to the oil industry after the historically bad week the crude sector saw. We're going to have details on all of that and look at the market reaction this morning with Ben Emmons of Medley Global Advisors, as well as Panmure Gordon chief economist Simon French. They're going to join me and Karen Moscow. Hope you will as well. On the Friday morning edition of Bloomberg Day. We finally made it to Friday, Caroline.
We have 5 weeks in lockdown here in London, so yeah, I'm happy to go.
Oh, is that
Friday.
all?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Nathan, for joining me. And yeah, we'll tune in definitely to listen to Bloomberg Daybreak, which of course is up next. And if you're listening on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance on DAB. Okay, let's talk a bit about the FX markets then this morning. So EU talks ended yesterday with no agreement on a recovery package, but Europe does seem to be inching a bit closer to an economic response to cushion the blow from the steepest recession expected in living memory. Key details, though, yet to be sorted out, and the ECB president warning that they're doing too little too late. So joining me now down the line is Jeremy Stretch, Canadian Imperial Bank head of G10 FX strategy. Jeremy, I want to start with Europe this morning. There doesn't seem to be that much reaction, to what is yet another moment when European leaders don't seem to be stepping up to the plate to help deal with, this massive crisis.
Good morning, Caroline. And in a sense, you're possibly right, but I think it also reflects the fact that the market, I think, had a relatively low bar of expectation vis-a-vis the EU leaders. Now, so clearly, I think the risk of the outcome of last night's meeting or yesterday's meeting was asymmetric, i.e. if they had agreed some degree of enormous package and or debt mutualisation, you would have seen a significant degree of upside potential. But in the context of, as you've correctly put it, just inching towards an agreement, there's obviously still plenty of gaps in the process, not least of which any disbursement of funds, whether it be loans or grants. There are so many issues still to be resolved. But as I say, the market, I think, is probably of the view that the Eurozone is and does continue to be relatively slow in terms of its decision-making function, partly because of its nature, because of its broad-based spectrum. And so, in a sense, that's probably why the market has not aggressively sold the euro. We have obviously drifted off through the course of the last 24 hours or so, and we are still susceptible to a breakdown through towards those 2020 lows in the 106s. So it's a case of a slow grind lower, I think, at least in the current environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Business as usual, I guess, is how you might phrase it. But then what about the Italian debt issue? We, of course, have got S&P Global Ratings looking at Italy, perhaps a downgrade for Italy to junk status. I mean, if that were to happen, that would surely be, a seismic change, wouldn't it?
Well, you would think notably yes, but of course the ECB has been quite smart here because, of course, they've adjusted their own rules in terms of the collateral that they would accept in the context of any downgrades from investment grade, so that any bonds which were deemed to be investment grade when the ECB adjusted their collateral backdrops back at the early part of this month would still be acceptable. So I think there is the risk that Italy will see further ratings pressure, and I think that we will see further ratings pressure in a number of jurisdictions across the Eurozone. But I'm not sure necessarily, even if Italy were to suffer a 2-notch downgrade to take them to sub-investment grade, that in itself will be an obvious and direct catalyst to see the euro trade aggressively lower, because, as I say, the ECB have already preempted this to a degree by the adjustment of their own collaterals regarding bonds of junk status.
Yeah, very true. What about the US then? The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index rising for a 5th session in a row. We're heading for a weekly gain. This in the face of massive spending by the US government. Another tranche agreed and expected to be signed into law by the president today. But the dollar goes from strength to strength.
Well, that's true, and clearly the fiscal backdrop in the US is going to be incredibly challenging, and of course the US went into this COVID crisis with a fairly parlous fiscal backdrop in any case. But I think in the context of the rescue packages, I think the fact that the House passed that, $484 billion package last night really contrasts to an extent with the relatively slow-moving pace of rescue measures in the Eurozone. And yes, we know that the economic data has proved to be very troublesome in the US, and the jobless claims series over the course of the last 5 weeks have demonstrated that. But then again, the pace of claims is slowing. The pace of continuing claims have also eased back a little bit. So I think we are in a scenario, at least for now, where episodes of risk-off trading are still providing reason and rationale for the dollar to continue to grind higher. So in terms of the broader dollar indexes, it does look as though we're going to be continuing to edge back towards the early month highs because of the lackluster response of the euro to the EU leaders package, and or the broader weaknesses we're seeing in other currencies such as sterling, where the data also proves to be rather downbeat, to say the least.
Oh, yeah. I mean, looking at the retail sales numbers this morning, really gruesome, but no surprise given that everybody's at home, stuck in their homes. Britain also heading, obviously, from a massive borrowing binge. So, yeah, as you say, sterling, more risk the downside. I haven't even gotten, Jeremy, to talk about Brexit, even though there were actually discussions between the EU and the UK this week. I haven't heard much out of them, obviously.
No, we haven't. But we should get Mr. Barnier giving a press briefing at 1:15 Brussels time to 12:15 London on the progress or lack thereof of those talks. So it will be fascinating to see how he puts the backdrop of this second round, which has been, of course, delayed by 6 weeks of discussions. The UK is scheduled to put out its own written response later in the day. So again, it'll be also interesting to see the scale of agreement or disagreement in terms of both instances. And in that press briefing, I think it will be fascinating to see what Mr. Barnier responds should he be asked about the time available and the possibility of being able to negotiate a meaningful trade deal in the time that is available. I think he will, if asked, suggest that there is a lack of time, and that continues to be an issue that I think will sort of weigh in the background as far as sterling is concerned. That without the extension of the implementation period, it seems almost implausible to think of anything other than the UK effectively sanctioning a no-deal exit, which, of course, on top of everything else, will just add another layer of sterling negativity.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder whether the Prime Minister, if he does return to his desk on Monday morning, whether, things will come to a head in terms of asking for an extension to the Brexit negotiations. Whether that might happen, we shall see. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeremy Stretch, who is the head of G10 FX strategy at Canadian Imperial Bank. Thank you so much for your time this morning on Bloomberg Radio. Really good to speak to you. Just lastly, before we head to break, and you'll be hearing from Nathan Hager in a moment, the markets, we're down by 1.1% for US Stock 600 futures. We're speeding up in terms of the earnings, and next week we'll start to get a lot of European bank earnings, so that will give us more direction for the markets. As for US futures, also in the red this morning, down 0.2% on S&P 500 E-mini futures. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, live from London. This is Bloomberg.
Who's in your corner?
We've never been further apart, yet somehow never closer.
To support people making a difference and those local communities affected during these extraordinary times, Barclays is supporting the Big Night In appeal. We kickstarted our donation with £1 million and matched Barclays customer donations up to a total of another £1 million. So far, the appeal has raised an incredible amount. So thank you. Visit barclays.co.uk to find out more about how your donations are helping. All donations will be split between the registered charities.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Friday, April 24th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Congress passes a fresh round of aid for small business.
The Treasury considers measures to prop up the oil industry.
A former White House official backs a bailout for state and local governments.
Global stocks slump, Treasury yields fall, and oil stabilizes.
More people in New York may have had COVID-19 than first thought. Plus, a new study shows the coronavirus dies faster under light, warm, and humid conditions. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Giants and Jets both went for tackles in last night's NFL Draft first round. LSU quarterback Joe Burrow was the first pick to Cincinnati.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Learn why the world's most sophisticated advisory firms and broker-dealers rely on Pershing to help them improve profitability, create efficiency, attract talent, and manage risk at Pershing.com.
And U.S. futures are lower as we enter the final trading day of the week, 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 3 points, Dow futures down 15, NASDAQ futures down 26. The DAX in Germany is down 1.5%, the CAC in Paris is down 1.3%, and so's the FTSE 100. Nikkei 225 in Japan fell 0.9%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was down 0.6%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 0.59%. Yield on the 2-year, 0.21%. NYMEX crude oil down 3.25% on 54 cents at $15.96 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.4% or $7.20 at $17.5330 an ounce. The euro 1.0753 against the dollar. The yen 107.71. Nathan.
Karen, we begin on Capitol Hill, where the House has sent the latest coronavirus aid package to President Trump's desk. Here with the latest is Bloomberg's Emily Wilkins in Washington.
The House passed a $484 billion coronavirus aid package. A lot of that includes funding to help out small businesses. It also includes funding for hospitals, for vaccines. But Congress is already starting to work on yet another bill, knowing that there is still a lot of pain going on in the economy and seeking to address that.
President Trump is expected to sign the measure today. It will replenish the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses and provide funds for hospitals and virus testing.
Up next, Democrats want aid for state and local governments. There's been pushback from Republicans on that front, with Senate Leader Mitch McConnell preferring bankruptcy for states over a bailout. Now, President Trump's former top economic advisor is weighing in. Gary Cohn tells us the federal government needs to step in.
Like we are providing liquidity to small businesses, now medium-sized businesses and large businesses, I think we also need to provide liquidity for states who've been asked to step in and provide liquidity for their citizens and their businesses within the states.
States are struggling with soaring healthcare costs and plummeting tax revenue. The National Governors Association estimates that states and municipalities will need at least $500 billion in aid.
Well, meantime, the Treasury Department is weighing aid for the oil industry. Secretary Steven Mnuchin is considering loans for U.S. companies reeling from the plunge in oil prices. Here with more is Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern.
What they're looking at is a lending program for U.S. oil companies. And one person familiar with the matter said it could be run out of the Federal Reserve. They're considering taking financial stakes in exchange for some loans, and some firms might be asked to reduce production. But we have seen President Trump really want to lend a helping hand to the U.S. oil industry because they are in dire need.
President Trump has asked his Treasury and Energy secretaries to make sure oil companies have access to lending programs in the latest coronavirus rescue plans. The White House has vowed to stem job losses in the industry as a plunge in prices hits the shale patch. After a historic week, oil is stabilizing, with West Texas Intermediate crude down about 1.5% right now, down 25 cents, $16.25 a barrel. Brent is lower by 2% at $20.91.
U.S. deaths from COVID-19 are now approaching 50,000. The outbreak is easing in some of the hardest hit spots while gaining steam in others. For the latest, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Karen. We're seeing daily infections of the U.S. increase at the slowest pace in 3 weeks. Cases rose 2.5% overall. The spread appears to be slowing in New York, New Jersey, and Florida, while picking up in Massachusetts and Texas. New Jersey is speeding up coronavirus testing, but Governor Phil Murphy says capacity needs to double before he considers reopening the state.
I want to open up as much as the next guy, by the way. We're not there yet. We're just not there yet.
Test results in New Jersey are now available in as little as 5 days compared to 14. Cases in the state have now surpassed 100,000. Live in New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thanks. Meantime, in California, coronavirus fatalities continue to climb, with the state reporting its deadliest day yet. Here with more is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
Good morning, Karen. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 was down 0.9%.
Governor Gavin Newsom says it is not time to open up.
I know there's deep desire. People are making calls on an hourly basis saying it's time to open back up. Consider the deadliest day in the state of California for the last 24 hours, 8.5% increase in the total number of deaths. We saw 5.6% increase in the total number of people tested positive.
But he says decreases in hospitalizations and ICU admissions. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ed, thank you, and we're sorry for that error. We turn now to Juliet Sally, though, because we're turning to the markets, and it looks like another down day for stocks. Equities in Japan and Korea led declines in Asia overnight, and Juliet joins us from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 was down 0.9% as consumer prices slowed again in March due to plummeting oil prices and slumping consumer demand amid the coronavirus pandemic. China's CSI 300 also retreated, with the PBOC's latest move to add further stimulus widely factored in. Investors shied away from risky assets in India ahead of the weekend amid an extended domestic lockdown, while stocks in Australia rose. The ASX 200 up 0.5% in Sydney, driven by a rebound in energy shares. In Singapore, Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thanks. Here in the U.S., shares of Intel are down more than 4% in early trading. The company reported profit that topped estimates, but withdrew its full-year sales forecast, citing significant economic uncertainty due to COVID-19. Intel sees weaker enterprise government demand for chips in the second half. This is Bloomberg. And it is now 5:07 on Wall Street. Michael Barr joins us on this Friday morning with a look at the latest world and national news headlines. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. A New York study seeking to measure the spread of the coronavirus found that almost 14% of 3,000 people tested across the state had signs of the virus. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says that implies about 2.7 million residents may have had COVID-19. During his daily briefing, Cuomo once again slammed Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell when the majority leader said that Republicans are not interested in revenue replacement for state governments.
New York puts in more money to the federal pot than it takes out. His state takes out more than it puts in. Senator McConnell, who's getting bailed out here? It's your state that is living on the money that we generate.
New York State is approaching 21,000 deaths from the virus. New Jersey is reporting more than 5,400 deaths. Connecticut says more than 1,600 people have died from COVID-19. Georgia begins to reopen today. Governor Brian Kemp is allowing gyms, hair and nail salons, tattoo parlors, and bowling alleys to open for business today. Atlanta's mayor is calling on Governor Kemp to rescind his order, saying she has serious concerns about reopening too soon. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms.
I feel we are not in a position yet in which we need to begin opening up businesses in our city.
Restaurants and movie theaters follow on Monday. According to a government study, the coronavirus doesn't last as long on door handles and other non-porous surfaces when it's exposed to sunlight, higher temperatures, and humidity. It comes as President Trump suggests using very powerful light on people to kill the virus. The WHO has warned against using UV lamps to sterilize any part of the body, saying it can cause skin irritation. When told that bleach and alcohol effectively kills the virus on surfaces, the president during his news briefing suggested this.
I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?
Pulmonologists warn inhaling bleach could damage the lungs. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. We're coming up to 5:10 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. We have something to talk about, John Stash Hour, the NFL Draft.
Yeah, how about that, Nathan? Actually, something live to watch on TV last night. And the Giants and Jets both have young quarterbacks and both drafted tackles in last night's first round. And for the same reason, to protect Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold. Giants drafting 4th overall took Andrew Thomas from Georgia, 3-year starter in the SEC, a league that had 15 first-rounders go last night. The pick was a bit of a surprise. Some had Thomas as the 4th best tackle in the draft. So second straight year, Giants GM Dave Gettleman took a guy a little earlier than most expected. That was certainly the case with Jones at number 6 last year after he made the pick. Gettleman was seen putting on a mask. He said it was because there was an IT guy at his home. The Jets, with the 11th pick, took Mekhi Becton from Louisville, who, if nothing else, is the largest player in the draft. 6'7", listed about 370 pounds. That's down. He was at one point near 400, but he ran the 40 in just over 5 seconds. Also at the Combine, his drug test was flagged, but there'll be no penalty for that. Becton never failed the drug test in college. LSU quarterback Joe Burrow going to Cincinnati. He's the 5th to win the Heisman, the national championship, and be the first pick of the draft.
I knew I was going to have a really good season because I knew, we had really good players coming back. I had great coaches, and we were going to work really, really hard to do it. But to jump up to number 1 overall is crazy to me, but it's a dream come true.
First of 4 QBs drafted last night. Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa went to Miami. Oregon's Justin Herbert to the Chargers, and Green Bay moved up to take Utah State's Jordan Love. John Stash Tower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures have swung higher now, with S&P futures up 7 points, Dow futures gaining 93, NASDAQ futures higher by 7 points. 10 years down, 230 seconds, yield 0.60%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fair housing. That's HUD.gov/fair housing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do
Just there, Dave. Smashing. Great. Really? Night, Steve.
Yeah, see ya. Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung rugged range.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Typical Danny. Imagine trying to unwind at a spa weekend and you wind up getting your mud pack all over your fave personalised dressing gown. But no worries, just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to National Lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you. Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
We're joined exclusively now from Wellington by the New Zealand Finance Minister, Grant Robertson. We've been talking about how alone and how unprecedented the approach that New Zealand has chosen to take in attempting to completely eliminate the virus, not just suppress or mitigate. In an economic sense, I'm wondering if you've looked at modelling or forecasting that suggests that this may enable a quicker and more robust rebound, or is there just the risk that even if New Zealand eliminates the virus, the rest of the world, for all intents and purposes, is still shut down, so the economic woes will continue?
The approach we've taken from the beginning is that the best economic response to the virus is a strong public health response. The sooner that we can get it under control, the sooner the economy can come back to some sense of normality. And so we've had our Treasury here do a range of scenario planning around different lengths of time that the virus would be slowing economic activity. So we have an alert level system in New Zealand, and the most strict end of that alert level, levels 4 and level 3, and then looking also at time spent at different levels.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are dropping as the region's leaders struggle to finalize a long-term plan for cushioning the economic blow from the coronavirus. U.S. stock index futures are moving higher, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up about 7 points. Dow futures up 71. NASDAQ futures up 4. The DAX in Germany's down 1%. 10-year Treasury down 2/30 seconds, yield 0.60%. The yield on the 2-year 0.22%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1/3% or 6 cents at $16.55 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.6% or $10 to $17.55.10 an ounce. The euro 1.0760 against the dollar. British pound 1.2333, and the yen is at 107.67. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Some states are showing some positive signs in the fight against the coronavirus, while other states still haven't hit the apex. Bloomberg's John Tucker has more in this live report.
And Michael, U.S. infections increased at the slowest pace in 3 weeks. In the epicenter of New York, cases rose 2.5%. Deaths rose to over 19,500. In New York City, 21.2% tested positive for a blood marker showing that they had been infected at some point. President Trump, meantime, said at the daily White House coronavirus briefing that social distancing guidelines will be extended until we feel safe. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
John, thank you, sir. In the virtual NFL draft, round 1, quarterback Joe Burrow went overall as the number 1 pick to the Bengals. The Giants took offensive tackle Andrew Thomas in the 4th pick. The Jets took another offensive tackle, Mekhi Becton, with the 11th pick. Also in the first round, the 49ers selected defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw and wideout Brandon Ayuk. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Michael, thank you. It is 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and Ben Emmons joins us on this Friday morning, Manager Director of Global Macro Strategy at Medley Global Advisors. Interesting to watch the markets this morning, Ben, with European shares continuing to move lower while we're starting to see futures on Wall Street on the upswing. What are you watching this morning?
So it's interesting to watch indeed that the stock market here in the United States continues to be in a stage of stabilization, if not potentially going higher. And I think it's a lot to do with that we'll continue to put stimulus in the system, take the fiscal package that's just approved overnight, and then we're going to get more central banks following again next week. And I think markets are taking just cues from this that we're slowly but surely at some point going to get out of this crisis that we're in, but the stimulus is not going to stop. And I think that is really supporting at least the stock market in the United States, whereas in Europe, there may be somewhat more of a backdraft there because not only the data is really bad, but on the fiscal side, they're having challenges to get a really comprehensive package through, and that may be playing a role there. That's why we're seeing the divergence.
I mean, we're seeing pretty bad economic data in the U.S. as well. Like every time a jobless claims figure comes out, it's pretty dire. I mean, is the market fully pricing in the economic damage from this pandemic in the U.S.?
So I think what the market has priced in is that the damage that taking place in March and now shows up in April through the data, that probably has been largely priced in during let's say the March 9th through March 12th, intense sell-off that we saw at that time. But then any kind of damage that follows from there, so data that comes out in May or June, if that were to continue to show like major collapse of data, right? If it's not forward-looking indicators, then just production and employment and so forth, then not, right? Obviously, so I think there's a thinking within the market that if we reopen the economy, that some of this really collapsing data will start to recover, if not by May, then into June. And if that were not to materialize, then yes, there is a risk for the market to go lower.
What's the risk from a second wave of infection if the coronavirus, coupled with a flu season, were to revive?
Yeah, I think there's two risks happening there. So on the one hand, there's another wave of this virus developing on the other side of the world, right? You're seeing in countries in the Middle East, as well as in Africa and parts of Latin America, where the cases are slowly creeping up, like we've had when we started this crisis in March, right? And there's a thinking that there, because of this virus being so contagious, that it gets bigger there, and that will set ourselves up for a second wave again back in the developed markets here in the United States and Europe in the fall. This is actually the view of Dr. Fauci from the task force. Then in addition, of course, the combo of flu and virus makes the picture very complicated, as they highlighted in the press conference the other day, really because maybe it's hard to distinguish between who has flu and who has the virus, and that's a sort of challenge with our system. So I think those are risks in the future. At this moment, markets are more focused on the stabilization we're seeing today, but the second wave we can't count out.
What is the risk of erosion of the Chinese economy having a spillover? We've heard from a number of economists who think that the Chinese economy could grow only by as much as 2%. Is there a risk that puts a drag on the overall recovery of the global economy?
It for sure does, because as always, as much as we are curbing travel to China to an absolute minimum, the ultimate recovery of China, having started in this crisis first, right, and having already, seeing a recovery in data over the last month, which a lot of people think this is what will happen here too, once you get out of the crisis slowly but surely. China has a lot of challenge because, if trade is just near to a standstill everywhere, then that, of course, affects China the most, and then China, cannot maybe internalize entirely the slowdown, right? It cannot internalize enough with stimulus, or it hasn't done enough. And I think these are the risks for the global economy, that China just doesn't recover fast enough coming out of this crisis.
Ben Emmons, thanks for being with us as always. Ben Emmons is Managing Director for Global Macro Strategy at Medley Global Advisors. Kind of a shift in the markets, particularly in the U.S. now, with S&P futures higher by 4 points, Dow futures up 44, NASDAQ futures back on the downswing with a loss of 1 point right now. DAX in Germany lower by 1.2%, the CAC in Paris down 0.9%. Back in the U.S., 10-year Treasury down 3/32, the yield there 0.61%, 2-year yield 0.22%, and for a 30-year yield, the yield is 1.18%. And you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Another wild ride on Wall Street ended with a narrowly mixed close yesterday. In the end, the Dow was up 39 points. The S&P lost 2, or less than 0.1%, and the NASDAQ ended little changed, losing almost 1 point. The catalyst for a drop was a flurry of media reports suggesting that a Gilead Sciences coronavirus treatment may be running into trouble. President Donald Trump is expected to sign a $484 billion package of financial aid today after the U.S. House gave the bill overwhelming approval yesterday. Most of the money is aimed at helping small businesses, but hospitals are also receiving much-needed funds. Another huge U.S. meat plant has closed indefinitely, with experts saying the country is just weeks away from shortages. Tyson yesterday said it was shutting its beef facility in Pasco, Washington, while workers undergo COVID-19 testing. At least 8 major U.S. meat facilities have halted operations over the course of a few weeks. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at bevel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Vatal Shah is senior project. Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
We're all having to get used to the new normal. And at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck and it's new problem solved.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to National Lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York, Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960 to the country, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Congress has sent the latest coronavirus aid package to the White House. Lawmakers overwhelmingly passed the $480 billion bill. Now they face off over the next rescue measure, where funds for state and local government take center stage. Here with the latest is Bloomberg's Emily Wilkins in Washington.
There's a debate over how much should be given to states and localities. You saw several Republicans coming out and saying that if states aren't able to continue funding, they might need to declare bankruptcy. That's something that a number of governors have pushed back against, saying that they need help from the federal government at this point as well. So that is definitely a debate to sort of keep our eye on going forward.
President Trump is expected to sign the current measure today, which will replenish the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses and provide funds for hospitals and virus testing.
Well, meantime, the White House is also weighing aid for the oil industry. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin is considering a lending program for U.S. companies reeling from the plunge in oil prices. Here with more is Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern.
They're considering taking financial stakes in exchange for some loans, and some firms might be asked to reduce production. But we have seen President Trump really want to lend a helping hand to the U.S. oil industry because they are in dire need.
The White House has vowed to stem job losses in the industry as a plunge in prices hits the shale patch after a historic week. Oil is stabilizing now. NYMEX crude oil is down just 0.5% at $16.42 a barrel. Brent is lower by 0.8% at $21.17.
U.S. deaths from COVID-19 are now approaching 50,000. The outbreak is easing in some of the hardest hit spots while gaining steam in others. For the latest, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. We're seeing daily infections in the U.S. increase at the slowest pace in 3 weeks. Cases rose just 2.5% overall. The spread appears to be slowing in New York, New Jersey, and Florida, while picking up in Massachusetts and Texas. Nationwide, infections are nearing 900,000. Live in New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures are higher, up 9.5 points. Dow futures up 78. NASDAQ futures up 19. The DAX in Germany's down 1%. 10-year Treasury down 2/30 seconds, yield 0.61%. Yield on the 2-year, 0.22%. NYMEX crude oil is little change at $16.50 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.5%. It's up $8.60 at $17.54 an ounce. And the euro is at 1.0766 against the dollar. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. A New York study seeking to measure the spread of the coronavirus found that almost 14% of 3,000 people tested across the state had signs of the virus. New York State is approaching 21,000 deaths from the virus. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy says he understands that businesses want to reopen, but the state has yet to flatten the curve.
We try to call every shot we can here based on science, fact, data. I want to open up as much as the next guy, by the way. We're not there yet. We're just not there yet. Now, that doesn't mean we're not preparing and wargaming for that, trying to get the right level of advice, which we are. But the house is still on fire.
There are now more than 5,400 deaths reported in New Jersey from COVID-19. Connecticut is reporting more than 1,600 deaths. California Governor Gavin Newsom has reported a sad signpost in the coronavirus fight. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
While he says there's a decrease in hospitalizations and ICU admissions,
the disease killed more people in the state of California in the last 24 hours than any previous 24 hours. We still have more positives in this state every day. So disease continues to spread, and we need to continue to spread the word of vigilance.
And he spent some time urging separation as the state heads into a beautiful weather weekend. He says if people go to the beach and aren't careful, he will be reporting an increase in cases next week. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Government research shows bleach and strong rubbing alcohol are considered the best ways to kill coronavirus on inside surfaces.
I can tell you that bleach will kill the virus in 5 minutes. Isopropyl alcohol will kill the virus in 30 seconds, and that's with no manipulation, no rubbing, just spraying it on and leaving it go. You rub it and it goes away even faster.
Bill Bryan, a senior science official at the Department of Homeland Security, also says that experiments with coronavirus samples indicate that the virus does not do well under sunlight, in warm temperatures, or in humid conditions. Intrigued by Bryan's presentation, President Trump suggested hitting the body with a tremendous ultraviolet or just very powerful light. WHO has warned against using UV lamps to sterilize any part of the body, saying it can cause skin irritation. Presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden is calling on Congress to provide enough money for every state to allow voters to cast a mail ballot this November amid the coronavirus pandemic. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. Just before 5:36 on Wall Street, we get the Bloomberg Sports Update now. John Stashower. John?
All right, Nathan, the NFL's virtual draft got pretty good reviews on social media last night. It began with the Bengals, to the surprise of no one, taking LSU quarterback Joe Burrow, who grew up not far from Cincinnati. At the start of last season, Burrow was projected as a 6th-round pick.
Well, I wasn't very good my senior year. You know, it's pretty simple. I worked really hard to get better. All my guys worked really, really hard to get better. And we just gelled as a team this year to do exactly what we did. I just wasn't as good as I was my senior year. but I worked really, really hard to improve.
Burrow transferred to LSU from Ohio State, so the Buckeyes' 2017 roster had the first 3 picks last night as 2 defensive guys followed. Chase Young to Washington, Jeff Okudah to Detroit, which put the Giants on the clock. And they took tackle Andrew Thomas from Georgia, a guy who plays the piano and drums, and the hope is he can protect Daniel Jones and open some holes for Saquon Barkley. And the Jets, with the 11th pick, also took a tackle, Mekhi Becton from Louisville, who's 6'7", and depending on what he had for breakfast, 370 pounds. Both Thomas and Becton went pro after their junior years. They were both 3-year starters. A lot of speculation about Tua Tagovailoa, who had a brilliant career at Alabama, but there are injury concerns. Miami drafted him 5th overall. Another QB, Oregon's Justin Herbert, followed to the Chargers, and later Green Bay, looking for the eventual replacement for Aaron Rodgers, moved up to take Utah State's Jordan Love. 15 guys, nearly half the first round, played in the SEC. Second and third rounds take place tonight, rounds 4 through 7 tomorrow. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. It's 5:37 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Home sellers in New York's priciest neighborhoods are waiting longer to find takers. In Manhattan's Tribeca section, homes spent a median of 142 days in the market in the first quarter. That's according to Street Easy. In Astoria, it took 86 days from a home's listing to a contract. In Ridgewood, things got done in 78 days. New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority is in a perfect storm of needs as it seeks federal aid. The list of things the agency is looking for includes liquidity, bond market access, additional federal aid, and a way to solve what could be an $8.5 billion budget deficit this year. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy will need more space in the Atlantic Ocean to meet his goal to get half the state's electricity from offshore wind farms. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management says there aren't enough federal leases available to supply the wind farms Murphy wants by 2035. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
Thank you, Ed. 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WIOD in Miami, I'm reporting that Florida had the second highest number of new unemployment claims last week.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and for WBBM in Chicago, I'm reporting that yet another big meat plant has been closed indefinitely in the U.S., and experts say we're just weeks away from shortages.
I'm Caroline Hepcombe, Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on suggestions that Boris Johnson may be back at work on Monday after recuperating from coronavirus.
I'm Steve Podoskin on 1010 Wins in New York. We're talking about grocery delivery upstarts stepping up as the pandemic increases demand.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting Ford, GM, and Fiat Chrysler are under pressure as other automakers are already making plans to start making cars again.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. It's 5:39 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is online now with a cover on Wuhan reopening after the coronavirus. Read all about it at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can get a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. And listen to Business Week with Carol Nasser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio, and watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device. Just visit youtube.com and search Bloomberg Global News. A couple other stories we're watching this morning. Shares of Intel, they're down more than 4% in early trading. The company reported profit that topped estimates, but withdrew its full-year sales forecast, citing significant economic uncertainty caused by the COVID-19 outbreak. And JCPenney's begun preparing for a potential bankruptcy filing. Bloomberg News has learned the department store chain is discussing a loan that would keep it operating during a Chapter 11 restructuring. The pandemic has forced Penny to close its stores. S&P futures higher by 7 points. Dow futures up 63. NASDAQ futures higher by 14 points. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset
Asset Management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is your Bloomberg. Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Hey, y'all, we're taking the Marty Party to a whole new level with the Marty Smith's America podcast with Gerald McCoy.
I truly believe that Carolina made a mistake letting Cam go. This is not a personal shot at Teddy Bridgewater. This could have been Andy Dalton. This could have been whoever they brought in. Cam has so much left. Somebody's really getting a great one, man. And I don't think people really understand what they're getting.
Search Marty Smith America to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
On air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, coronavirus update. The U.S. House passes a nearly $500 billion measure, which in part provides small business employees a paycheck.
The bill adds more money to the popular program that was drained of funds in the first few days. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy lamented it took too long to pass the bill, but he said Congress will press on.
We did not ask for this virus. We did not invite it. It came from a distant land. But together, we will defeat it.
not only for our country, but for the world.
And to do that, he said Congress must and will act, saying future stimulus bills are likely.
There's Linda Kenyon. Coronavirus around the globe. Philippine President Duarte threatens to declare martial law after accusing communist rebels of killing 2 soldiers who were escorting food and cash deliveries during a coronavirus quarantine. In Japan, more infections have been confirmed on a cruise ship docked in Nagasaki. I'm John Trout.
They don't just talk to the most important people.
Is it as ominous this time around?
They talk with the most interesting people.
Are they taking this seriously?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are falling as the region's leaders struggle to finalize a long-term plan for cushioning the economic blow from the coronavirus. Meanwhile, U.S. stock index futures are on the rise. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up almost 12 points. Dow futures up 89. NASDAQ futures up 23. The DAX in Germany is down 0.9%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32nd, yield 0.60%. The yield on the 2-year 0.22%. NYMEX crude oil down 1.7% on 28 cents at $16.22 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.4% or $7.50 at $17.53 an ounce. The euro 1.0765 against the dollar. British pound 1.2321, and the yen is at 107.65. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, more evidence is emerging that far more New Yorkers have had the coronavirus than the number confirmed by the lab tests. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said that blood samples collected from about 3,000 people indicated that nearly 14% had developed antibodies to fight a coronavirus infection. The United Auto Workers Union is throwing a wrench into any thoughts by Detroit automakers of restarting factories soon. UAW Union President Rory Gamble says an early May restart date is too soon and too risky for union members. In the virtual NFL draft, round 1, quarterback Joe Burrow went overall as the number 1 pick to the Bengals. The Giants took offensive tackle Andrew Thomas in the 4th pick. The Jets took another offensive tackle, Mekhi Becton, with the 11th pick. Also in the first round, the 49ers selected defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw and wideout Brandon Ayuk. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
And good morning, 5:49 on Wall Street. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. Good morning, I'm John Tucker, and we are joined live now by Ferdinando Giuliano, Bloomberg Opinion columnist, joining us from Milan this morning. He's writing about antibody testing and some of the limits associated with the test. Fernando, good to talk to you this morning. First, remind everybody the importance of testing as reopenings are being considered right now.
Well, of course, there are 2 types of testing we are discussing. One is the kind of mouth swab, which have been with us for some weeks now, and they tell us whether you have an active infection happening, and they're important because if you do, they would allow the health authorities to, first of all, take care of you appropriately, knowing that you have this virus, but also to track possibly all the people you've been in touch with and make sure that they do not go around and spread the virus. The test I write about in my column is the second type of test. It's the antibody test. It's a blood test, which understands whether you have you have or have had the infection in the past, and so you've developed some form of antibodies in the blood, which in theory could help you to fight the virus where you incur in it again. So the hope is that if there is a very large population which has these antibodies, we might get close to something called herd immunity, which means that the virus is basically even people who haven't developed the antibodies are defended by those who do.
Now, it doesn't necessarily mean having antibodies means that you're resistant to infection, does it?
Well, no, I mean, there are so many questions over what exactly what these antibodies mean. First of all, it's not clear whether, people will develop the same amount of antibodies and so will be equally protected from a reinfection. One possibility is that if you had a milder form of the disease, your antibodies may be less strong. But the other very important point is we just don't know how long this immunity will last for, and that's for a very simple fact. This virus has been with the human population for just a few months. So we, at the most we can see the reaction of people who've been infected 4 to 5 months ago in China. For, most cases we see in the US or in Europe, we've only seen these antibodies in people's blood for just a few months' time. So we just can't project into the future, really.
Who's doing these tests right now, and what has been the experience so far?
Well, so obviously New York has done it, and Governor Cuomo gave some preliminary results yesterday showing that around 13% of the New York State population, of the sample, is projected that 13.9% of the 13% of the population has developed these antibodies, and in New York City this could go above 20%. We have similar, tests going on in Germany, in Italy, and one is being started in the UK. But those for example, in Germany and Italy, show us that even the worst affected areas of these countries, which are roughly comparable to New York, I would say, have a similar rate to what Governor Cuomo was describing. For regions, we're looking at between 10 and 15%. What this tells us that even in these very heavily affected regions, we are far from the level of herd immunity, which is normally seen at the lowest, at around 60% of the population. And we shouldn't forget that there will be areas of the country, of each country, which will have a far lower prevalence. Imagine southern Italy, for example, or U.S. states which haven't really been affected by the virus that much. And that means that herd immunity there, we are very, very far away from it.
And this also raises for me, just a few seconds left, but some ethical dilemmas. The most vulnerable among us who want to get back to work might be tempted to get infected, so they get antibodies.
Well, that's something which we've seen in history, in fact, in previous infections. The point is that this is this would be a very risky strategy, but also, one which is very hard to see employers relying on, because once they start testing people, they realize that there are far more people without these antibodies than they've wished for.
Okay. Bloomberg opinion columnist Fernando Giuliano joining us from Milan. You can read more on these and other stories in Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing OPIN-GO. Karen.
John, thank you. It's 5:54 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. It's brought to you by American Arbitration Association. International trade or business dispute resolved faster with the International Center for Dispute Resolution, the leader in alternative dispute resolution around the world, ICDR.org. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Legal experts say it could be constitutional to allow states to declare bankruptcy, but Congress would have to avoid infringing on state sovereignty and rely on court oversight. The Environmental Protection Agency issued a warning to Facebook and other social and e-commerce platforms that they are being used to sell fake products that claim to fight the coronavirus. The Labor Department says Preston Rutledge is stepping down from his post as head of the Employee Benefits Security Administration.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story we're watching. Missouri suing the Chinese government. The state claims China covered up the extent of its coronavirus epidemic through, quote, an appalling campaign of deceit that led to the death and suffering of Missouri residents. For more on the lawsuit, June Grasso speaks to Bloomberg legal reporter Gris Domich.
This suit seems to be an uphill legal battle right out of the gate because of the legal doctrine of sovereign immunity.
Pretty much. It's going to be very, very hard to get past even the initial stage, given the Foreign Immunity Sovereign Act. Those suits generally prohibit any kind of action against a foreign state unless it can be proven that there is a company behind it entirely privately controlled. But there are very few exceptions, and the likelihood that this suit will survive even the initial dismissal stage is pretty slim. Courts have been very hesitant to allow these kind of suits to go forward. And in some cases, don't even require the country that's being sued to even respond to the suit. Sometimes, in some cases, they've just sent back the legal documents to the people suing, and they've been deemed immune.
Also with the proof, not only of the claims of what China did, allegedly, but also of the connection to harm to Missouri's residents.
Yes, it's going to be hard to show. I mean, obviously, they can easily point to the numbers. But any judge is going to be skeptical of the claim that, that they caused direct harm to anybody who lives in Missouri by suppressing information or denying the spread of this pandemic. And Mississippi joined Missouri in filing a similar lawsuit. So we have at least two states that have gone after China in this forum. And, it followed efforts by a lot of politicians, including Josh Hawley, a senator from Missouri, to carve out an exception in that act that would allow people to pursue these claims against China.
So then is this suit more political than anything else?
I mean, it certainly can be viewed that way, given it came after the efforts of several prominent Republicans to allow people to sue China, and with some pretty strong language, obviously, even from the president, wanting to lay some blame on them.
And that's Bloomberg legal reporter Chris Domich speaking with June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. S&P futures up 15 points this morning. Dow futures up 110 and NASDAQ futures up 33. The 10-year Treasury down 132nd, yield 0.60%. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel-good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry-on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
On the Bloomberg Business app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Friday, April 24th, 2020. Coming up this hour,
Congress passes a fresh round of aid for small business.
The Treasury considers measures to prop up the oil industry.
A former White House official backs a bailout for state and local governments.
Global stocks slump, Treasury yields fall, and oil stabilizes.
More people in New York may have had COVID-19 than first thought. Plus, a new study shows the coronavirus dies faster under light, warm, and humid conditions. I'm Mike LeBar. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Giants and Jets both went for tackles in last night's NFL Draft first round. LSU quarterback Joe Burrow was the first pick to Cincinnati.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And good Friday morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. futures are higher as we enter into the final trading day of the week. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up about 13 points. Dow futures up 82, NASDAQ futures up 20. The DAX in Germany's down 0.9%, so's the FTSE 100. And the CAC in Paris is down almost 0.8%. Nikkei 225 in Japan fell 0.9%. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong down 0.6%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 0.60%. The yield on the 2-year 0.22%. NYMEX crude oil down 1.5% or 24 cents at $16.25 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.4% or $7.80 at $17.5320 an ounce. The euro 1.0765 against the dollar. The yen 107.65. Nathan.
And Karen, we begin on Capitol Hill, where the House has sent the latest coronavirus aid package to President Trump's desk. Here with the latest is Bloomberg's Emily Wilkins in Washington.
The House passed a $484 billion coronavirus aid package. A lot of that includes funding to help out small businesses. It also includes funding for hospitals, for vaccines. But Congress is already starting to work on yet another bill, knowing that there is still a lot of pain going on in the economy and seeking to address that.
President Trump is expected to sign the measure today, which will replenish the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses and provide funds for hospitals and virus testing.
Up next, Democrats want aid for state and local governments. There's been pushback from Republicans on that front, with Senate Leader Mitch McConnell preferring bankruptcy for states over a bailout. Now, President Trump's former top economic advisor is weighing in. Gary Cohn tells us the federal government needs to step in.
Like we are providing liquidity to small businesses, now medium-sized businesses and large businesses, I think we also need to provide liquidity for states who've been asked to step in and provide liquidity for their citizens and their businesses within the states.
States are struggling with soaring healthcare costs and plummeting tax revenue. The National Governors Association estimates that states and municipalities will need at least $500 billion in aid.
Well, meantime, the Treasury Department is weighing aid for the oil industry. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin is considering loans for U.S. companies reeling from the plunge in oil prices. Here with more is Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern.
What they're looking at is a lending program for U.S. oil companies. And one person familiar with the matter said it could be run out of the Federal Reserve. They're considering taking financial stakes in exchange for some loans, and some firms might be asked to reduce production. But we have seen President Trump really want to lend a helping hand to the U.S. oil industry because they are in dire need.
The president's asked his Treasury and Energy secretaries to make sure oil companies have access to lending programs in the latest coronavirus rescue plans. The White House has vowed to stem job losses in the industry as a plunge in prices hits the shale patch. After a historic week, oil is stabilizing now. West Texas Intermediate's down 1.6% or 27 cents, $16.22 a barrel. Brent is lower by 0.8% at $21.15.
U.S. deaths from COVID-19 are now approaching 50,000. The outbreak is easing in some of the hardest hit spots while gaining steam in others. For the latest, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Karen. We're seeing daily infections in the U.S. increase at the slowest pace in 3 weeks. Cases rose just 2.5% overall. And the spread appears to be slowing in New York, New Jersey, and Florida, while picking up in Massachusetts and Texas. New Jersey is speeding up coronavirus testing, but Governor Phil Murphy says capacity needs to double before he considers reopening the state.
I want to open up as much as the next guy, by the way. We're not there yet. We're just not there yet.
Test results in New Jersey are now available in as little as 5 days compared to 14. Cases in the state have now surpassed 100,000. Live in New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. Meantime, in California, coronavirus fatalities continue to climb, with the state reporting its deadliest day yet. Here with more is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
Governor Gavin Newsom says it is not time to open up.
I know there's deep desire. People are making calls on an hourly basis saying it's time to open back up. Consider the deadliest day in the state of California for the last 24 hours, 8.5% increase in the total number of deaths. We saw 5.6% increase in the total number of people tested positive.
But he says decreases in hospitalizations and ICU admissions. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ed, thank you. Turning to markets now, it looks like another down day for stocks. Equities in Japan and Korea led declines in Asia overnight. And Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 was down 0.9% as consumer prices slowed again in March due to plummeting oil prices and slumping consumer demand amid the coronavirus pandemic. China's CSI 300 also retreated, with the PBOC's latest move to add further stimulus widely factored in. Investors shied away from risky assets in India ahead of the weekend amid an extended domestic lockdown, while stocks in Australia rose. The ASX 200 up 0.5% in Sydney, driven by a rebound in energy shares. In Singapore, Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thanks. Here in the U.S., shares of Intel are down more than 4.5% in early trading. The company reported profit that topped estimates, but withdrew its full-year sales forecast, citing significant economic uncertainty caused by the COVID-19 outbreak. Intel sees weaker enterprise and government demand for chips in the second half.
And Boeing is poised to cut jobs and output. Sources tell us the plane maker will announce job reductions and cuts to 787 Dreamliner production when it reports earnings next week. Boeing's 787 program involves thousands of employees spread between factories in South Carolina and Washington State. S&P futures are up about 12 points this morning, and straight ahead we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. 6:07 now on Wall Street. Let's bring in Michael Barr with a check of what else is going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. A New York study seeking to measure the spread of the coronavirus found that almost 14% of 3,000 people tested across the state had signs of the virus. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says that implies about 2.7 million residents may have had COVID-19. Cuomo once again slammed Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell when the majority leader said that Republicans are not interested in revenue replacement for state governments.
New York puts in more money to the federal pot than it takes out. His state takes out more than it puts in. Senator McConnell, who's getting bailed out here? It's your state that is living on the money that we generate.
New York State is approaching 21,000 deaths from the virus. New Jersey is reporting more than 5,400 deaths. A member of an advisory group for Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont says the reopening of his state likely won't come until June at the earliest and will take months to complete. Connecticut says more than 1,600 people have died from COVID-19. Georgia begins to reopen today. Governor Brian Kemp is allowing some shops to reopen for business. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms is calling on Governor Kemp to rescind his order.
I feel we are not in a position yet in which we need to begin opening up businesses in our city.
Restaurants and movie theaters follow on Monday. According to a government study, the coronavirus doesn't last long on door handles and other non-porous surfaces when it's exposed to sunlight, higher temperatures, and humidity. It comes as President Trump suggests using very powerful light on people to kill the virus. The WHO is warning against using UV lamps to sterilize any part of the body, saying it can cause skin irritation. When told that bleach and alcohol effectively kills the virus on surfaces, the president, during his news briefing, suggested this.
I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?
Pulmonologists warn inhaling bleach could damage the lungs. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. Coming up to 6:10 on Wall Street, time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashauer.
Good morning, Nathan. The Giants and Jets both have young quarterbacks and both drafted tackles in last night's first round for the same reason, to protect Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold. The Giants drafting 4th overall took Andrew Thomas from Georgia, 3-year starter in the SEC. That's a league that had 15 first-rounders go last night. The pick was a bit of a surprise. Some had Thomas as the 4th best tackle in the draft, let alone the 4th player. So it's the second straight year that Giants GM Dave Gettleman has taken a guy a little earlier than most expected. That was certainly the case with Jones at number 6 last year. The Jets with the 11th pick took Mekhi Becton from Louisville, who, if nothing else, is the largest player in the draft, 6'7", listed at about 370 pounds. That's slimmed down. He was at one point near 400, but he ran the 40 in just over 5 seconds. Also at the Combine, Becton had his drug test flagged, but there'll be no penalty for that. He never failed a drug test in college. LSU quarterback Joe Burrow is heading to Cincinnati. He's the 5th ever to win the Heisman Trophy, the national championship, and be the first pick of the draft.
I knew I was going to have a really good season because I knew, we had really good players coming back. I had great coaches, and we were going to work really, really hard to do it. But to jump up to number 1 overall is crazy to me, but it's a dream come true.
First of 4 QBs drafted last night. Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa's going to Miami. Oregon's Justin Herbert to the Chargers. And Green Bay moved up and took Utah State's Jordan Love. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
Thank you, John. Tune in tonight for the Bloomberg Business of Sports show. More high school athletes are skipping college to turn pro overseas, and we speak with one of their agents, Happy Walters, co-founder and CEO of Catalyst Sports and Media. Catch that conversation tonight at 7 and tomorrow at 11 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio, or subscribe to the Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast. Futures moving higher. This is Bloomberg.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago. Just this wall and that one to do, Dave, and then we're done. Whoop! Oh, no!
Hello, Steve the Sparky.
Pass us that roof tile, Chris.
Yep, sure.
I'll be fun. Oh, no. Oh, phew. Saved by the gutter. Built to rough it with contractors. Samsung Rugged Devices.